But it's the last one, and it's kind of a wrap-up. And that's kind of how Daniel treats the last few chapters, chapters 10, 11, and 12. It's kind of a wrap-up of themes that have been going on since the beginning. And Daniel has these themes that it's all these beastly people that are described as goats and rams running around, running amok. Everything is scary. All these beasts, these tyrants of people that are hurting God's people. It started off with Babylon, that God's people were taken over by Babylon. Then those people are taken over by Persia. Then those people are taken over by Alexander the Great in Greece. And then that kingdom kind of falls apart, and there's this guy named Antiochus IV Epiphanes who that is described here as the abomination that causes desolation. And it's scary. And the abomination that causes desolation, what happens is this guy named Antiochus comes, and he liked Zeus a lot. You guys are familiar with Zeus. He liked Zeus a lot. He took all of the Hebrew worship elements out of the Jerusalem temple and put all these elements to worship Zeus inside the temple. And on top of that, he went and grabbed Hebrews one by one, and he would take one a day and put it in front of the temple, and it's you are going to worship Zeus. And if they didn't, he would mutilate them and then kill them. Can you imagine having to live under something like that? I think we could call it the abomination that causes desolation, right? That's truly scary. That's truly something that is terrifying, right? And when we look forward into those, and you can say listen, you pastor types are always telling me that I should have hope in the victory, but things are super scary now. So I set that up pretty severely, and I worry that it's going to fall flat, because next I'm going to liken this to NASCAR. So, I worry that I did that too much, and so this is how it likens it. This is Chase Elliott. Do you guys know who this is? Yeah, you guys. Yeah, you said that a little too proudly. Because this guy is the most popular driver in NASCAR right now. Little too proudly. So you probably know his dad, though. You guys remember Bill Elliott back from the 80s and all that stuff? Some of you, I'm getting I know that. His dad was the most popular driver. Then he had Dale Earnhardt Jr. and all that stuff. So a few weekends ago, the most popular driver, they were at Charlotte. It's a road course. And they're in the championship thing right now. Everything matters right now for all these drivers. And this guy is in the championship hunt, and he's leading the race on a restart. And some of you maybe saw this, and this is what happens. All right, that's his car. He overshoots the thing, leading the race, and crashes. How awful, right? Here's another view of it. Can you imagine? Now, this is the most popular driver in NASCAR right now, whiffing the turn right in the middle of the race, right? That's awful, isn't it? Can you imagine being just invested in this guy, and all of a sudden that happens, right? So sometimes you like certain baseball teams named the Braves, and you're going to go over to your friend's house that watches the Cardinals, Phil, and in the very end, and before you even get there, they're already down by 10 points. But I don't know about it like that. But there's a lot of times when we get so involved in something as meaningless as sports, right? We get so involved, and it raises our blood pressure, and we are I don't know if my guy's going to see this through. You know, you go over there and you watch this guy crash halfway through the race, and just is well, his championship is done now. Right? And it can raise your blood pressure, and you don't know what's going on. And that's why I'm kind of likening it to what's going on in Daniel, because there's all these things that are bad that are running around, and we don't know what to do with them. We're looking around, and we just feel like everything is losing. When I talk to people, they're I'm just scared about everything today. I look around the world and it seems like there's these goats and rams and chaos and beasts all around. They're just running amok. And Daniel is doing that too. He's bringing that sense to all of this. You know, Daniel, he's describing these tyrants as beasts, as people that are almost subhuman, because they're lowering the humanity of God's people. And we can read Daniel kind of like how we read Revelation, and you can read it and you're like, oh man, this book it's like a book of horrors. Like it's a book, it's scary. We should only read this in October. And we should only read this during scary parts of the season. But all it is about violence and people taking over and how God's people is losing. But there's a funny thing. God's people, even after Daniel was written, God's people still looked at this book with hope. They still looked at this book like it was a book of hope. Even though life seemed so scary, they looked at it with hope. Why? Why did they look at it with hope? I think it's because Daniel is telling the truth. Even though Daniel is about a distinct point in history, because Daniel, it's about Babylon. Babylon taking over God's people. And then Persia came in and took over them. And then Alexander the Great in Greece took over them. You know, it just seems like all these people are coming over, and the book kind of ends with this abomination that causes desolation, with a Hebrew a day dying by mutilation. Right? Like it sounds scary, but the thing is oftentimes there are scary things going on all around us. And Babylon, and Daniel tells us the truth that he says, Babylon wasn't the first tyrannical regime. And Alexander the Great isn't going to be the last. It's telling the truth. These beasts are constantly arising and wanting to take over and tear everything down. These beasts are constantly wanting to run around and trample and drive us into the dust, right? Some of you may have remembered a boss that felt that way or something. Or maybe you were that boss that was driving other people into the dust. I don't know. But what we know that pattern, that feeling that all of this seems like it's just driving us in the dust, and it can seem hopeless, right? But the thing is, I think Daniel, what brings us hope is he's recognizing a pattern of the human condition. And that pattern of the human condition is simply this, that when broken, sinful people come together and seek power, when broken and sinful people come together and seek power, they always end up creating a violent beast. Right? Because it's not hard to turn on the news and see violent beasts creating havoc and chaos everywhere around us, right? I have the ability, we could just turn on the TV right now, and what do you think they'd be talking about on a news network? Got all the Sunday shows on right now. Chaos and havoc, right? Because chaos and havoc sell, by the way. Like that's part of the thing. Like chaos and havoc are all around there. And we see that we have this struggle with chaos and havoc, with the beasts that are causing it. And it's amazing how Revelation even picks up this same terminology about chaos and havoc being made by a beast, right? Remember the mark of the beast? Use your Revelation history there. Like it's this beast, right? And the beast is what is anti to God's kingdom. It is anti God's Messiah, or if we put it in the Greek, it's anti-Christ. See that? And any time you are trying to gain power, or someone is trying to gain power by lies, deceptions, by causing havoc and chaos and all those things, that person is fundamentally antichrist. He's a beast, right? It's just the consistency that there is always beasts wanting to cause havoc to amass power for themselves. And so that is constantly what's happening here. And we have this little book, this scary book that the Hebrew people have always found hope in. And I think it's because it tells the truth. And we're going to see some of that hope today. At the beginning of Daniel chapter 12, and Barbara came to Sunday school today. And I was like trying to get people to talk at the end of Sunday school like I normally does. And she nailed the sermon right away. So good job, Barbara. You get a star. You get to pick whatever baked goods you want. But it's this whole thing of there's hope found in these things. So let's read through it together. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, who has charge of your people. And remember, this is talking about this abomination that causes desolation right before this. Such has never been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time, your people shall be delivered. Everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. Does that sound familiar? Seems like a book that was written later, Revelation, kind of uses the same terminology, right? Shall be written in the book. And what are they going to be delivered from? And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall wake. Hold on. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth, like who is that? Is that people just sleeping outside? It's like sleep on a mattress, right? No, that's not what it's talking about, is it? It's talking about all those people that are buried in the hills around here. All those people that are buried in hills all around the world, those who are asleep in the earth, right? It's talking about all of those that are dead. It's talking about all of those things, but it's also hinting at something else with that dust language. And what is that hinting at? That's hinting at Genesis, right? It's talking about that how we were created and the curse that we have now. It's talking about how we were created, because remember in Genesis chapter 2 it says that God formed from the dust of the earth man, right? Humanity. It's all of us. Like he formed us all from the dust of the earth and he spirited into our nostrils. Remember, he blew into our nostrils and gave us life. Remember, breath, wind, spirit is all the same word in Hebrew. So he spirited into his nostrils and we became an animated, dusty being that was able to move again, right? And he created us from the very creation itself. But there came to be a problem because he said, you can have everything in the garden except for the one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. I know it's good and evil, but it's actually good and bad. That's when you translate it correctly. So it's good and bad. And because you can have all of that, and the humans, Adam and Eve, were like, yeah, but we want that. So they ate it. They ate to the tree thinking it was going to give them more, and boy, did it. And part of the curse is right here. It says in Genesis chapter 3, by the sweat of your face you shall eat everything that you eat. So with hard work and turmoil, then it says this, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. You were made from dust, and you are dust, and to dust you will return. I think there's something so intensely true about the curse here, because it doesn't matter if you believe in any kind of God or not. We know that when we face the loss of a loved one, something is wrong. And we may try to tell ourselves, if you're an atheist or not, and you may try to tell yourself, it's just the circle of life while you're singing like Lion King songs. Like it's just the circle of life when someone dies. Or maybe you're a Christian and you try to tell yourself weird things like, oh, they've gone off to be a better place. But no matter how much we're trying to convince ourselves of those things, we know the truth deep down inside of us that something is deeply broken whenever we lose someone. That something hurts so bad that there's nothing that could heal that wound, right? That it does, I don't care who you are and what you say, you know that there's something deep and hurt inside of there, and we've all felt it. And it's just like something's wrong. And something's so deep and broken that we're like, something feels broken. And it's because something is broken. Something is broken. That person was created here, and the system is broken. The curse has come upon us. We are constantly facing the idea that the beasts are pulling us into the ground. They're trampling us into the ground. That those running goats and those rams and the beasts and all those things, that they are trampling us in the ground. It feels like our life is constantly trying to stop it, but it feels like we're constantly being pushed into the dust of the ground. And Daniel says in verse 2, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall wake. Something new. Shall wake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And we'll get back to that. But some will to everlasting life. Suddenly something new happens, that we will rise again and live the life that we were originally intended. Before the curse, before the pain, before the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, that this will happen and we will rise here. Now, what is it not saying about the resurrection? Notice it's not talking about some afterlife. Some afterlife where you rise and you're going to be bouncing around in clouds with the Care Bears shooting rainbows out of your belly buttons, right? You guys are laughing that have seen Care Bears before, right? Everyone else is like, what's he talking about, right? That's not the picture that is given here. The picture is that we are rising here. The picture is that everything is being reconciled here. And the thing is Daniel is pulling from visions from all over the Bible, including Isaiah chapter 65, which says, for behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth. And the former things will not be remembered or come to mind. I'm creating everything new. Right? I'm creating all these things new, and you won't even remember the old ways there. And then he talks about what that looks like. And he says, they shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit, and they shall not plant and another eat. Hold on. Let's talk about that for a second. They will not build and another inhabit. They will not plant and another eat. Like, isn't that just like supply chain management? Like someone built my house for me. I didn't build it. What's he talking about there? He's talking about, I had my house and I was just fine. And then somebody came in, the Babylons, the Persians, Alexander the Great, and conquered us. And took all my work, took all my possessions, took everything I had, and they are now inhabiting it. And they're saying that there's a time coming when we won't have to worry about that anymore. And how long is it going to last? It's going to last like the days of a tree. Because trees can like the trees around here, I have trees that are like a year old in my house because my house is like a year old, right? But you go especially like North Florida, like all those lakes with all the Spanish moss around them, those trees are old, right? Like they're super old. And you think about back then when they're writing down this poetic language, they're coming up with the oldest thing they can. If you're big fans of Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings series, what are the trees there? Like the wisdom of the ages, right? Like that's this old trees, like their days will be like these old, it's the longest things they can think of, right? Everything will be made right. Everything will come together. And I want to show you how this works. I want to show you what's going on here, and we'll skip that. I want to show you what this works. When Jesus came, where did he go? I got the slide up there too fast. But where did he go? This is the first chapter of Mark, verse 14. He went to Galilee, right? Where's Galilee? Oh, Georgia. So, Georgia. It's in. Does Galilee matter? Barely. It matters because it's written here. It matters. It's kind of a trick question. I see what you're doing, Piper. It matters, but it's not Jerusalem. And who was the real power when Jesus was around? Who was the Babylon then? It was Rome. Listen, the whole thinking of how Jesus works is that he's supposed to go into the most powerful thing, take names, and establish the kingdom of God, right? And destroy Caesar and everything. Where does Jesus go? Nowhere. I often make a joke that Jesus came from Yeehaw Junction. That makes some people mad because they're like, Jesus can't come from there. But that's fine. Right? That's when you look at the Christmas stories of how it talks about Nazareth, anybody with any kind of thinking would have went, Nazareth? Nothing good comes from there, right? And he goes to Galilee. Just fishermen are there. It doesn't matter. You're not going to create a movement. You're not going to create anything of substance when you are going to places like that. Why in the world would you go to Yeehaw Junction? That's just somewhere people drive to get to Lakeland. like Polk County. Oh man, Polk County. Anyway, we won't go into Lakeland bashing right now, but it's especially someone from Port St. Lucie right now. But he went to Galilee and he proclaimed the good news of the kingdom of God. And how did he proclaim it? What did he do? He healed the sick. He went to people with leprosy. He went to people who were struggling. He went to all these people in this very earthly way, right? In the dirtiness of ministry, he went there and he healed them. He went to a nowhere town and talked to the nobodies, and he said that God loves them. Oftentimes I think we believe that Jesus, when he comes again, he's going to come to the biggest, most important people, do the biggest bout of warfare you've ever seen, and he's going to make everything right. Why would he do it differently when he comes again? That's what I want to know. He comes here and he sees all these people, they're over there, and then you know what he does? Remember how it talked about some will rise again and they'll have everlasting contempt? He goes to those people who should have everlasting contempt, the prostitutes and the tax collectors. Remember, he went to a tax collector that said, his name Matthew, and he says, come and be my disciple, Matthew. He saw a tax collector in a tree, and he said, I see that you're very small and diminutive, like Galilee, right? I'm coming to your house today. He sees all of this, and that's how he comes. And I think because he prizes those who have been down and out and hurt, I think we see and we know as God's people today that we saw that the beasts of the earth hated it. And they went to grab him, and we see that they tried to grind him into the dust of the earth, right? We see that they grab him and they drive him down into the dust of the earth. And we as Christians, we know the story that they grinded him all the way till he was dead. And I think the reason why Jesus went for it, the reason why Jesus went along with it, is because he had hope that God would take all the pain and the hurt and all of that from the world, and they would put it all onto himself as it drove him into the dust. But Christians, we believe in Easter, where we believe that something very special happened, that Jesus was the first to rise like Daniel had prophesied, that he was the first to rise, like Daniel had said. And he ushered in that Isaiah-like kingdom. But instead of that Isaiah-like kingdom being a full banishment of everything before, it set up shop right in the middle of each one of us, where through the cleansed and saved hearts of the baptized and the believers and all of that, the kingdom of God resides in us, and the light that shines out now goes to outside of us and blesses all those that are around it. Just like that song said right before the sermon. That it shines like the stars in the firmament. That we know that the victory is won even though it's scary. So let's talk about NASCAR some more and my old pal Chase Elliott, right? For those of you who know, who won that race? Chase Elliott did. He won that race. Do you know what's amazing? Is when you watch a race, after you know, because your phone tells you everything now, after you know who won the race, right? It changes how you watch it, right? It changes how you understand what happened in it. I watched this race knowing that he was going to win it. What did that wreck mean to me? It meant like, well, this is going to be exciting watching him come back now, right? Like that's here. I got a victory. This is really cool here. So after he won the race, he burns out like NASCAR guys do, right where he crashed. Right where he crashed. And this is the most awesome, this is why I'm showing you this. This is the most awesome move anyone could ever do right here. So the car starts rolling back, and look at what he's doing. When the car emerges from the smoke, he's standing on top of the car. Like that's a pretty cool thing to do. Then he lets it just roll off. Anyway. Do you see what I'm saying? When you know the victory's won, you get to watch all the beasts make their puffery and they run around looking like they're causing chaos everywhere, and you go, well, this ought to be fun to watch. Because I know it's all just temporary and doesn't matter a hill of beans. Christians, let's live like that. Live knowing that the victory has already been won. That when we see the beasts out there puffing out their chests and all of that, we're just like, oh, you're looking so cute trying to look all powerful and stuff like that. No, I'm not scared of you at all. Because they get our power when they feel like they can scare us and they can control us. The victory is won. And so because we know the victory is won, we can go out and we can do weird things like help the nobodies around us. We can have a bake sale. We can give money to the Bahamas. We can give money to Haiti, right, Mishak? We can help our neighbors because we know that the victory is already there. And that's good news.